So like many others, I have been waiting for my Analogue 3D. I wasn't one of the cool kids who got one early as a review unit. I was simply just a paying customer, a fan of the Nintendo 64, someone who was really looking forward to this system. And after patiently waiting and being very kind and respectful to the Analogue team over on Twitter, for the most part, my Analogue 3D has finally come in. I've been putting this thing through the paces, doing tests that other YouTubers haven't done, and I've got quite a few things to say about this device. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Without any further ado, let's talk about the Analogue 3D. Here's the front of the Analogue 3D. It's got a cartridge slot, a power button, and a reset button. And of course, you have 4 controller ports. The back of the system has 2 USB plugs, the power supply, the HDMI port, and an SD card that is included. You put a cartridge into the system like this, and you can wiggle it around a little bit. It is a bit of a tight fit, as you'll see me trying to get it out. And there's also a fan in this. Let's take a look at some games, though. Alright, so here is the interface for the Analogue 3D, and, well, it's pretty plain Jane. Whenever you insert a cartridge into the system, it will put the cartridge information on it. That basically tells you how many players can play the game, what accessories it uses, what region it was released in, the developers, the publishers, the release year, and that's about it. Now, this is fine for me. It is kind of weird, though, because if you look at their website, they definitely have a lot more like stuff going on in the menus that I haven't seen on this. I don't know if that's coming in a future system update. There is a system update that you have to do when you get this system initially. It takes about 5 minutes. It does come with an SD card, though, so it's not a big deal or anything like that. But hopefully that's something that's added in very soon. And you can see here at the bottom of the screen, you have play cartridge or configure. So I'm using an original N64 controller here. By hitting configure, you then get into the options for the games. And you can see there's lots of different options here, all of which do different things. So a virtual expansion pack, that's pretty self-explanatory. It makes it so that the system has an expansion pack in it. De-blur will make your visuals look less blurry. Disable anti-aliasing will also make your visuals look less blurry. These are things you could play around with in the actual game, so I feel like that's a better way to sort of convey that. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. You can force original hardware, meaning that you won't have any of these special features that the Analogue 3D can do. And then there's an overclock mode. Now, in the overclock mode, there are different sorts of versions of it. There's Enhanced, Enhanced Plus, and Unleashed. And basically what this does is it allows you to hit higher frame rates on games. So a game that maybe runs at, a fluctuating frame rate between like 15 and 25 frames per second will run a lot better on this. Ideally, obviously you still have to test out things on a game-by-game basis, but I do like that. And then you look at the display modes, and here's where it kind of loses me. BVMs and PVMs and stuff like that. I'm not really into that world. I don't own a PVM monitor. I know, fake retro gamer. You have CRT display mode, scan lines, and clean. For this video, we will be using mostly clean because I can't really give a good logical reasoning for whether the scan lines look good or not because I don't use scan lines on anything. You could do gamma transfer for tube TVs or modern TVs. We'll go with modern. You could adjust the sharpness of the image. You can adjust the way that the image is scaled with a fill, an integer, or an integer plus. And you could do the original image, a stretch image, or a cinema zoom image. So it is fun to play around with all of these different settings on a game-by-game basis. But it's definitely something that, I wish you could do it to where you didn't have to do it game by game. Like, there should be just a global setting. If you look in the SD card, there's a global setting file, but for whatever reason, it's not activated quite yet. But let's take a look at Super Mario 64. And to start things off, we're actually going to go with all of the default settings. If you did not mess with anything, this is how it would be straight out of the box for your experience. So this is how it all sets out when you have it originally put in there, and we're going to boot up the cartridge and take a look at it, and then we're going to compare some different things that we can do, especially with the overclock mode on it. So right out of the box, without changing anything, this is how the image looks. And I mean, it looks pretty good, honestly speaking. Obviously there are some scan lines. There's some, stuff going on to look like a BVM monitor, but I feel like it doesn't translate very well into video footage. So we can actually go into the menu system here and activate some different things in order to change how they look. So we can't do any sort of stuff with the unleashed mode or anything like that, but we can change all of the displayed modes and the hardware mode. So let's turn off anti-aliasing. And you can see it makes for a bit of a sharper image. If you look at the line across the screen for the grass, it gives it a little bit of jagginess to it, but it allows it to, be a little less aliased in the grand scheme of things. But here's where things get very interesting, because you could change all of this on the fly. You can add in scan lines, you can do CRT mode, or the clean mode, which, like I said, is what I want to show off for most of these games. Now, you can also do different image sizes with this. You could do a fill or an integer fill. I honestly think fill looks the best. Your mileage may vary depending on if you want to have a bigger screen output, and you can stretch the image or cinema zoom it. I guess you could do cinema zoom. I don't know, that doesn't really look all that great. But you can see here, you can also change the gamma sharpness. This gives it more of a deeper, richer color palette, and you can adjust the sharpness as well. You can see the textures around Mario's head start to change based on this, from very soft to very sharp. Now, obviously, this is going to be a game-by-game basis for how it looks, but if you look at it now, it looks very clean. This is a very nice, colorful image, a bit on the sharp side for some people. Some people might not like, just how jagged everything can kind of look, because it does kind of give it a little bit of a PS1 feel to it based on, what the anti-aliasing and the deblur did in these games. But I think it looks pretty good. I think this is a nice, sharp-looking image. It's something that you could constantly mess around with as well, should you want to. If you want to make it sharper or less sharp, you go a little bit softer to see if maybe that satisfies your needs. I like the options. I think the options are super cool with this, and it definitely gives it a lot of variety. But I really want to check out the overclocked mode, and I honestly own the perfect game for that. So here is Mission Impossible on the Nintendo 64, and you could see, this is not a very good, sharp-looking game. It's blurry. It has constant frame rate issues just walking around the halls, and is definitely a game that could use a little bit of an assistance. Now, I am doing the clean mode. I'm doing original N64 mode as well, so it doesn't have any of the bells and whistles turned on right now. Now, this is still a pretty decent image, all things considered, but you can clearly see that there are frame rate issues walking around these halls when you go into the main area over here or walk past people. It's a game that's fun. It's a game that's cool. It was very unique for the time, but it definitely is struggling a little bit here. But let's adjust some of these settings and see what we can come up with. Now, I've turned off anti-aliasing, I've disabled the deblur, and I've put it in overclocked mode for the system, the biggest one you can do. And you could see here, the frame rate issues have definitely been smoothed out, and the overall picture quality is quite a bit better. It's not going to be anything like you're going to get on an emulator, because that's not what this system is setting out to do. You'll never get Project 64 style results out of games, but I do think this is a much improved image, and this is a much better way to play the game, because now you can see things a bit more clearly, and the frame rate is definitely running a lot smoother overall. I really think the overclocked mode is probably one of the better features of this device, and it definitely impacts a lot of games that you'll end up playing. Here's GoldenEye 007 with original N64 mode on and clean settings. And you can see, it looks pretty good, all things considered. Obviously, you're not going to be getting, NSO-style emulation results out of the game, but it does look a bit better than it would on an original N64. However, there, of course, is slowdown. Sorry, Boris. I didn't mean to shoot you, pal. Hopefully you'll survive that. I don't think you will, but, we'll miss you. We'll miss you, buddy. Still a fun game, but definitely something that you know, the frame rate can be very sporadic. It could dip down into like single digits sometimes, especially when there's a lot of chaos on the screen here. But let's check out the overclock mode on GoldenEye to see what we can come up with. Now, here we have GoldenEye with anti-blur and anti-aliasing off, and we have it running in Unleashed mode, and the frame rate is definitely much better. It's not perfect or anything like that, but once again, I think this is a very nice image, and with the improved frame rate, it definitely feels quite a bit better to play this game. I would love to test out Perfect Dark, but I actually don't own it because I don't know. I never bought the game. I probably did own it at some point in time before I sold off a lot of my games. But it definitely does help games that struggle with frame rate. There's a lot of good things you could do with stuff like Pilot Wings as well, which is a notoriously slower running game. And having, you know, these additional features to play around with, and you can play around with them on the fly, I think it's pretty cool. You know, you can go and bring up the menu. The menu kind of gets weird sometimes, honestly, but you could see like the differences that these things make, and you could do different texture filters and stuff like that. I don't know, I just keep it normal. You could mess with the colors a little bit to look more modern. Once again, you can adjust sharpness on the fly and do different things with the image quality. I think this makes some games look very, very nice, and one of the biggest games that I play had a major flaw in it, and can it be fixed by overclocking? That's what we're going to see next. Of course, WWF No Mercy is a classic game, but if you've ever played this game and done the 4-player mode, you could see that, well, the game struggles. This is an unfortunate thing when you're playing the game on original hardware, and we're playing it with forced original mode on right now. So we're not using overclock or anything like that. This is how the game would play on an original N64, and unfortunately, we were just stuck with this. There was really no rhyme or reason as to why the game ran like this, but it definitely did, and it was not a fun experience for many people. The Can Overclock mode actually fixed this. And as you can see here, this is running exactly how it should be. And this is a huge deal to me. I think this is absolutely fantastic because as it stands right now, this is the only way to play No Mercy in a 4-player mode, and it runs the way it actually should. Yes, you could do it with emulators and stuff like that, but as far as playing like a cartridge on the N64, you won't be able to do that and get these results in this game. So that is a big win. This overclock mode, I think, is going to be really fun for people to test out over time to see what it can truly do, because this is notorious as one of the games that always struggled in the 4-player mode, but now it no longer does. And I'm sure we'll see more people talk about this in the future, but this is definitely a very, very big deal. Taking a look at how raw graphics with some minor changes are done to try and get the best image quality possible, I thought it would be fun to take a look at Star Fox 64, because this is a great game, but it's definitely a little bit messy at times when playing on original hardware. However, on this system, I think it looks really nice. You know, you have a lot less blur going on, a much sharper image quality, and yes, it's not as good as it would be on an emulator, but we're trying not to compare it to emulation because it's not emulation. It's an FPGA core. It's doing things differently. And I think the result that you get with Star Fox 64 with tinkering with some settings looks very pleasing. The nice thing is you can always change it to look crusty like it did on your CRT TV, so you're not stuck with anything like that, and you could just sort of change it on the fly to see kind of what works for you on a game-by-game basis. But I think Star Fox looks absolutely fantastic on the N64 right now because of the Analogue 3D and the additional features that you have at your disposal. Your mileage is going to vary from game to game. Some games will be a noticeable difference, some there won't be. But I think the overall aesthetic of the games definitely shines a bit more, especially on modern televisions now. What about Japanese cartridges? The system handles them just fine. It does display the same information on the main menu. Obviously, it's all in Japanese, and this copy of Virtual Pro Wrestling obviously has some modifications done to the characters, which, I mean, that's kind of interesting how whoever owned this originally did change some things up with the character attires, which was exclusive to this version of the game. Make sure you own the Art of N64 Wrestling games to learn about all of the differences between the American and the Japanese version of Virtual Pro Wrestling 64 and WCW NWO World Tour. Obviously, it's still all in Japanese, but this is a pretty easy game to play as far as figuring out what you're doing, especially if you are an N64 aficionado, such as myself. Well, at least when it comes to the wrestling games of the system. So overall, I think you're going to get great experiences playing your N64 games on this system for the most part, because there is a caveat. There is a problem that we actually need to talk about that definitely needs to be fixed very, very soon, because it's something kind of frustrating for me. And it's something that you might have noticed. I'm showing off all cartridges, but RGT, don't you play a lot of ROM hacks? What's going on with that? Well, let's talk about that. You might see here I have an unknown cartridge, and what this unknown cartridge is my EverDrive. My EverDrive is not recognized by the Analogue 3D system, which is a problem because I mostly play my EverDrive when I'm playing my N64 games. I'm playing ROM hacks. I'm playing new stuff that's being developed for the N64. Luckily, I still had a small but decent collection of N64 games to check out for this video, but my EverDrive is not working. Some older EverDrives do work. I have the X5. Some summer carts work, but it just seems like there's no stability with this. Now, Crix does have an Analogue 3D coming his way, and he did say that he was planning on figuring out why an EverDrive isn't working right now in order to make one work for the system so that we can all enjoy it. But it does seem kind of strange to me that Analogue didn't reach out to Crix beforehand, maybe send him a review unit so that this could be nipped in the bud before people started getting their systems in. Because I feel like a vast majority of people who are going to buy this system will have an EverDrive. Some other minor complaints I have about the system is the fact that you can't use the SD card that's loaded onto the system as a controller pack in order to save games that require a controller pack. At least I haven't figured out a way to do that quite yet, which is kind of annoying because, controller packs are kind of a pain in the butt to figure out, what game is on what one and all that sort of stuff. Hopefully that's something that'll be addressed in a future update. And obviously once the community gets their hands on this system, there's going to be a bunch of different modifications done to it. But overall, I know I give Analogue a lot of crap, and it's rightfully so. They deserve it for the way that they handled the launch of this system, the way they didn't show anyone anything, the way that they delayed it multiple times. Just all the secrecy doesn't really make any sort of sense to me. Yeah, okay, it doesn't look completely different than an original N64. It doesn't look like an emulator does, so maybe they were scared that people wouldn't see the big enough difference in it. But I feel like people like me told people, hey, don't expect a massive difference with this versus an original N64. It's just going to be a simple and clean way to play it. And the fact that there is overclocking, which nobody knew about, which will make your games run better potentially on a game-by-game basis, definitely makes this a very attractive system. I think this is something that people are going to want to get their hands on. It'll be very interesting to see how the M64 is in comparison to this. But overall, I'm happy with it. Once the EverDrive situation gets fixed, I'll be happy as a pig in mud because I'll be able to play all my ROM hacks. And some of those ROM hacks will even work better because if you play a No Mercy ROM hack, you still have that 4-player problem that pops up, but you won't have to deal with that anymore. Let me know in the comments section down below, though, what do you think of the Analogue 3D? Are you impressed by the amount of features you have on this system? Did you manage to pick one up? And if not, do you plan on picking one up? It does seem like they're doing another update of systems on this upcoming Monday, depending on when you're watching this video. So you'll have a chance to potentially get one of these. But will you take that opportunity? I guess that's up to you. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.